I woke up with the taste of copper in my mouth and the feeling of fire burning through my lungs, staring up at a sky so blue it looked fake, while the realization hit me that my own flesh and blood had just left me to rot in the middle of the Mojave. My son and my brother, the two people I would have taken a bullet for, had just driven away in my own truck, leaving me with nothing but the clothes on my back and a shallow gash on the side of my head where my brother's tire iron had met my skull. As I lay there, feeling the heat of the sand start to seep through my shirt, I couldn't help but wonder, is there a limit to forgiveness, or am I the villain for what I did to them once I finally made it back? I need you to listen to this entire story and tell me honestly if I went too far, or if a father's wrath is justified when his family tries to erase him from existence. To understand how I ended up bleeding out in the dirt, you have to understand the kind of man I've always been. My name is Elias, and for 30 years I've been the pillar of my family, the guy who worked 12-hour shifts at the mill to make sure my son, Jason, never had to want for anything. My brother, Marcus, was always the opposite, a drifter, a gambler, a man who viewed a job as a temporary inconvenience between scams. When our parents passed away, I took Marcus in, bailed him out of debt more times than I can count, and even gave him a room in my house when he hit rock bottom. I thought I was being a good brother, but looking back, I was just feeding a parasite that was getting hungrier by the day. Jason, my only son, grew up watching me bail Marcus out, and I suppose he learned the wrong lessons. He didn't see my hard work as a virtue. He saw my generosity as a weakness to be exploited. By the time Jason hit 24, he and Marcus were inseparable, bonded by a shared resentment for my rules, and my insistence that they actually contribute to the household. The tension reached a breaking point when I inherited a significant sum of money and a small plot of land from an uncle on my mother's side. It wasn't life-changing wealth, maybe $200,000, but to Marcus and Jason, it was the jackpot they'd been waiting for. They started dropping hints about investments and business opportunities, which were really just code for me handing over the cash so they could blow it on sports betting and bad habits. I told them no. I told them that money was my retirement, the security I had earned after decades of manual labor. That no was the death warrant of our relationship. They started whispering in corners, their eyes following me around the house like vultures waiting for a carcass to stop moving. One morning, Marcus came to me with a fake smile, claiming he wanted to make amends. He told me he'd found a potential buyer for the inherited land who wanted to meet in person at the site, which was a few hours out into the desert. He said he and Jason wanted to drive me out there, have a guy's weekend, and finally act like a real family again. Against my better judgment, against every instinct screaming in the back of my head, I agreed. I wanted to believe my son loved me. The drive out was deceptively pleasant. We laughed, we talked about old times, and for a few hours I felt like I had my family back. But as the paved roads turned into gravel, and the gravel turned into sand, the atmosphere changed. We were miles from the nearest highway, surrounded by nothing but Joshua trees and heat waves, when Marcus asked me to pull over because the truck was making a weird noise. The moment I stepped out and leaned over the hood, the world went black. Marcus hit me from behind, and as I fell, I saw Jason, my boy, my pride and joy, standing there holding my wallet and my phone, his face cold and indifferent. They didn't even have the decency to finish the job. They just dragged me behind a rock, took my keys, and drove off, leaving me to the elements. They thought the desert would do their dirty work for them. They thought I was an old man who would just curl up and die. But they forgot one thing. I'm the one who taught them how to survive, and a father's memory is long. I spent the first hour just trying to keep my vision from blurring. The sun was a hammer, beating down on me, and I knew that if I didn't move soon, the dehydration would take me before the night chill did. I had no water, no map, and a head wound that pulsed with every heartbeat. I started walking, using the position of the sun to head west toward the distant mountains where I knew the old mining roads were. Every step felt like walking on broken glass. My tongue felt like a piece of dry leather in my mouth, and the hallucinations started around sundown. I saw my wife, who passed 10 years ago, standing among the cacti, beckoning me forward. I saw Jason as a little boy, asking me to pick him up. The anger was the only thing that kept my blood moving. I wasn't just walking to survive. I was walking for an explanation. I wanted to look into their eyes and see the moment they realized they hadn't killed me. By the second day, my skin was blistered and my mind was fraying at the edges. I found a small crevice in a rock formation that held a tiny pool of stagnant, muddy water. It was disgusting, likely filled with bacteria, but I drank it like it was the finest champagne. It gave me enough strength to keep pushing. I found an old, abandoned shack near a dry creek bed, relics of a mining operation from 50 years ago. Inside, I found an old rusted crowbar and a tattered piece of tarp. I used the tarp to shield myself from the midday sun and the crowbar as a walking stick. I was a ghost walking through the wasteland, a man who had already died once and had nothing left to fear. On the third day, I heard the faint hum of an engine. I dragged myself to the edge of a dirt road and collapsed just as a park ranger's truck rounded the bend. When he found me, I couldn't even speak. I just pointed toward the horizon, my eyes burning with a fire he couldn't understand. So, that is the situation I found myself in, betrayed by my own blood, left to die in the dirt, and miraculously pulled back from the brink of the grave. I had a choice to make. I could go to the police and let the law handle it, or I could take back what was mine in a way they would never forget. Before I tell you how I handled my return and the gift I left for Marcus and Jason, I want you to pause right now. Go down to the comments and tell me, if your own child left you for dead to steal your life savings, would you forgive them, or would you make them pay? What would you have done if you were the one crawling out of that desert? When the ranger got me to the hospital, I gave a fake name. I told them I was a hiker who got lost and fell. I didn't want the police involved yet. If the cops went after them, they'd just go to prison, and that was too easy. I needed them to think I was dead long enough for them to show their true colors. I spent 4 days in that hospital bed, getting pumped full of fluids and having my wounds tended to. Every minute was spent planning. Once I was discharged, I hitched a ride back to my town, arriving under the cover of night. I didn't go to my house. I went to the small apartment Marcus kept on the side of town. I watched from the shadows as they pulled up in my truck, laughing and carrying bags of expensive electronics and new clothes. They were celebrating. They were spending my retirement before I was even cold in the ground. I waited until they were both inside, likely drinking and bragging about how easy it had been. I had a spare key to the apartment Marcus didn't know I kept. I let myself in through the back, moving like a shadow. When I walked into the living room, the silence that fell over them was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Marcus dropped his glass, the red wine staining the carpet like the blood he'd left on the sand. Jason turned white, his mouth hanging open as if he'd seen a literal demon. I didn't scream. I didn't swing the crowbar I'd brought with me. I just sat down in the armchair, looked at my watch, and said, "You guys are late for dinner." The psychological toll was immediate. Marcus started hyperventilating, begging for mercy, claiming it was all Jason's idea. Jason, the coward I raised, started crying, saying Marcus had forced him into it. It was pathetic. I told them I had already contacted my lawyer and the bank. I told them that if they didn't sign over every asset they had, including Marcus's apartment and the title to his car, and leave the state within 24 hours, I would hand the dashcam footage from my truck over to the police. You see, they were so arrogant they didn't realize I'd installed a hidden, cloud-synced security camera in the cabin of my truck a month prior because I'd suspected Marcus was stealing tools. I had the whole conversation of them planning to leave me in the desert recorded and uploaded. I gave them a choice: total poverty and exile, or a lifetime in a cage. They signed, they packed their bags and left that night, scurrying away like the rats they are. I took everything from them, just as they tried to take everything from me. I sold the apartment, kept the truck, and moved to a different state, never leaving a forwarding address. Now I sit on my new porch, watching the sunset, knowing that my son is out there somewhere, probably broke and hating me. Some people say I was too harsh, that I should have tried to rehabilitate. Him or that family is sacred regardless of the sin. But I believe that when you leave your father to die for a handful of silver, you aren't family anymore. You're just a stranger who knows my weaknesses. I chose to survive, and I chose to win. Was I wrong to strip them of everything and cast them out, or did I simply give them the desert they deserved? Like this video if you think I did the right thing by standing my ground. Subscribe for more stories of betrayal and justice, and make sure to share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll be reading them all to see if anyone thinks there was a better way to handle such a betrayal. I'll see you all in the next story.